Hello everyone, I'm Professor Plank. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Before we get into today's video, a special shout out to my most recent super thankers, Banana Slug 1951, Lark LaTroy, Binline Weber, Shovelhead Steve 1172, Piao Meow Noir and a Waifu Car, James Lamica, and Martha V 4654. Thank you very much for your kind support of my channel. You are the secular smorgasbord, satiating the search for sound epistemologies in the shadow of supernatural stupidity. Thank you very much for helping me to continue to do what I do. And if you like what you see in this video and would like to help out the channel, make sure to subscribe, click the bell so you'll always be notified when new content comes out, and of course, like the video, maybe pop in a comment. All that stuff goes a long way towards pleasing the YouTube algorithm, the true higher power that we should all show fealty to, and keeping my channel motoring along. Now on to today's video. Today we're going to be hearing from a fellow by the name of Jon Hindi, who is a Christian talking to other Christians about what to do when they encounter an atheist. One imagines that this is the kind of talk that permeates around insular religious communities, where not only is everyone a fervent believer, but the very idea of anyone not being like-minded in their belief is so ridiculous to them that they practically view atheists in the same light as leprechauns. Like, if they find one out in the wild, they'll capture them just so they can have proof to all their friends and family that they really did come across one of these elusive creatures.
Trust me. It's better if it's a 1, 2, 3. Surprise! I know, right, buddy?
I'm gonna cut off your balls and feed them to you!
So, with it in mind that Jon is obviously a believer talking specifically to other believers, I'm sure he's going to describe us atheists totally accurately and not just descend into stereotypes about non-believers from an egotistical position of thinking that he, the Christian, has the non-Christians completely figured out. But let's hear what he has to say about us. Take it away, Jon.
Let me tell you about what to do with atheists. When you're visiting with somebody and you talk about family and occupation and outside activities, and then you ask somebody, do you have any religious background? And they say, well, I'm an atheist or agnostic, whichever it would be. That used to scare me.
Booga booga.
And I didn't know what to do with that, because I always assumed anybody who was an atheist was an intellectual and they knew a whole lot more about everything than I did, and I was in over my head.
Well, thanks for that. That's quite a change from the usual theistic position on atheists, which is the stock standard notion from Psalms 14:1. The fool hath said in his heart there is no God. They are corrupt. They've done abominable works. There is none that doeth good. Most Christians and theists at large think atheists are small-minded buffoons. So it's nice to find a believer who thinks the opposite, that atheists are all smarty smart pants. Now, to be clear, it's just as prejudicial of a position as thinking that we're all fools. It's just more of a positively prejudicial position. But you're still prejudging. Atheists are normal people. There are smart atheists, and there are foolish atheists. There are atheists who are intellectuals, and there are atheists who are more emotionally driven. To assume some kind of unifying character trait to an entire subset of people really just serves to other them. It sets them in your mind as an outsider group that is so radically different from yourself and your own kind that you need to develop typical traits you can assign to them to allow for stock standard rules of how to behave towards them. Here's a crazy thought. How about recognizing that atheists are unique individuals and any generalizations you want to assign to them are going to prove incorrect a lot of the time, and maybe it's a better strategy to just treat us as, people. I mean, it's just an idea.
I'm having one of those things. A headache with pictures.
An idea?
I found something out. I'm not afraid of atheists anymore, and you don't need to be afraid of them either. I've learned that behind every atheist is one of 4 basic stories.
Oh boy, he's boiling us down to a small number of motivations. Can't wait to see how he's totally got us pegged right.
Most people are an atheist for one of 4 reasons. 1, they were educated into being an atheist. Maybe in their science classes in high school or college, or a philosophy class or some other history class, somebody taught them. It could have been a teacher, could have been a parent, it could have been a friend who leaned in that direction, and so they just pushed them in that direction, led them in that direction. So they were educated into it.
That's bad.
Can I go now?
So then, being educated in science and philosophy is a bad thing? This is just a weird way of expressing this point, Jon. I mean, it's a fairly standard apologist talking point. There's no shortage of religious speakers who extol on the dangers of higher education, but usually such education is framed more as indoctrination from malicious, atheistic professors who just hate God and want to spread themselves like some sort of a zombie virus, turning everyone they come across in the classroom until everyone has had their faith browbeaten out of them.
And jump to the conclusion, which every sophomore is already aware of, there is no God.
But you didn't do that. You didn't malign a science or philosophy education. You just framed it as simply being educated has a good chance of turning someone atheist. Isn't it interesting that you think getting educated, or being an intellectual, as you put it earlier, has a good chance in resulting in a person no longer believing in the magic and supernatural that is the foundation of Christianity? Almost like demystifying the movements and reactions of the natural universe causes one to no longer be able to assume that it's all because of God magic. But sure, if you want to posit that gaining greater knowledge of things has a good chance in people no longer believing in the thought-terminating dogma of organized religion and theistic belief, then sure, I won't argue with you on the validity of that notion.
A second category is somebody who had a bad experience with a church or religion, and they just decided to write it off. If that's what it's all about, I want nothing to do with it.
In my experience, a person who has had a bad experience with a particular church, or more specifically, people in positions of power at that church, are far more likely to just find a different church than they are to stop believing in God altogether. I mean, when Greg Locke called out some of his congregants as witches just to cement his power and authority within his church, did they stop believing in God, or did they just move somewhere else?
We got first and last names of 6 witches that are in our church. And you know what's strange? 3 of you are in this room right now. You better look in my eyeballs. We ain't afraid of you, you stinking witch.
No, they just moved on to a different church. Seems to me if having issues with a particular church was the impetus to stop believing in God completely, then that person's faith was already on shaky ground. They were close to becoming an atheist already, they just needed the final push to get them there. So I would think that there's much more going on with someone who lost their faith and claimed it's because Billy down at the worship house was mean to them.
Some become atheists because they have a bad experience in life. They've suffered some loss or something, and they were trying to figure out if there's a God of love, and why did he let this happen? This is bad. So this happened, and
Are we just going to breeze by the random sound effect chiming in where it had no business being? All right, you snappy YouTube editor, you. Carry on.
bad, so there can't be a God of love or he wouldn't have let this happen. So I just dismiss God.
I'm not going to say that a tragic life experience hasn't resulted in some people claiming atheism. I'm also not going to try to get into a no true Scotsman fallacy and try to claim that everyone who does that was never really an atheist. But there is a difference between people who are mad at God and stop following a religion and people who actually stop believing in that religion or that God. A person who still believes in gods and hates them for letting something bad happen to them is more accurately described as a Misotheist. Misotheism, or the hatred of God, or hatred of gods, hating the gods, or God-hating. A related concept is Dystheism, the belief that a god is not wholly good and is in fact evil. Now, neither of these terms are particularly well known or have penetrated the cultural zeitgeist, so people who fit this definition are liable to call themselves atheists just because it's a more well-known term for someone who doesn't follow a religion. Also, the definition of atheism itself is not particularly well understood, particularly among the religious, with many religious people thinking that atheism is basically a hatred towards God. Answers in Genesis claims that not only do atheists really believe in God, but one of the main reasons we claim that we don't is just because we actually hate God. This is a common, pervasive position among many Christians, that atheists really do believe in God. Hell, it's not uncommon that Christians, or people of various religions, insist that belief or knowledge of God's existence is innate to all of humanity, and so everyone really, truly believes in God. So if everyone actually believes in God, then an atheist must just be someone who wants to deny that reality. And why would anyone do that? Well, they must just hate God for some reason. This really is what many apologists claim about atheists, and what many more believers think is true of atheists. But atheism is nothing more and nothing less than not believing in God. It does not necessarily entail being mad at the idea of God that they don't believe in.
Or the fourth major reason, I'm going to have to change my lifestyle. I can't keep doing what I'm doing the way I do it, when I do it, how I want to do it, and with whomever I want to do it. So I know enough, I do not want to give up my way of life. So it's easier just to get rid of God rather than have to deal with those changes.
This is a strange one. I mean, it's another common one when it comes to what theists think motivates atheists, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So a person starts off believing in God and then starts doing things that go against religious edicts. Maybe they want to sleep around with a lot of different people. Or maybe they're LGBTQ and they don't want to subject themselves to the straight-up torture and illegal practice of conversion therapy. Or maybe they just want to sleep in on Sundays and, damn it, church is so freaking early. So easier just to stop believing in God. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense for a couple of reasons. For one, what did these people think their unchristian behavior was going to do to them when they first started engaging in it? I mean, if they believed in God when they started their dirty, sinful ways, why did they start them at all? If they knew God wouldn't approve? And if they just couldn't stop themselves, then why did they wait till later on to stop believing in God? Why wait until after the behavior has become so ingrained into their personality that they would rather stop believing in God than stop engaging in the sinful behavior? Also, not for nothing, but there are no shortage of people who sin it up all week long and then go get saved on Sunday. A large selling point of the faith is that as long as you say you're sorry, you can get away with literally anything and be forgiven for it with a few Our Fathers, couple of Hail Marys, a promise not to do it again, though if you do it again, just come back next week and say you're sorry again. A few more trips around the rosary and you're all square with the house. So the whole "you're just an atheist because you want to sin" thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And these are the four motivations for people to be an atheist that Jon has encountered. Educating into atheism in college, bad experiences at church, tragedies in life, and wanting to keep sinning. I'm gonna call BS and say that I don't believe that you've encountered, well, all that many atheists at all to start with, and the ones that you have, I'm willing to bet that none of them gave any of these reasons as their motivations for being an atheist. But instead that you assumed that one of these were their actual reasons, regardless of how they explained their atheism. Because these are four of the most common stereotypes that Christians have about atheists. I mean, I've been an atheist and bouncing around the online atheist community for a while now, and I've never heard anyone give any of these as their reasons for becoming an atheist. Typically, most deconversion stories include not seeing any rational reason to believe in the supernatural, the proven inaccuracies of the Bible, or any religious text in question, or the philosophical problem of evil in the face of a supposed tri-omni God who should have the power, knowledge, and desire to eliminate evil from the world, but for some reason doesn't. And that's just to name a few of the reasons that are more common that atheists will give for not believing than the ones that you gave. Much more common than "my teacher told me so," "the pastor was mean to me," "my cat died and Tommy said there's no kitty heaven," or "I refuse to refrain from," let's say, promiscuous activity with individuals of accommodating amorous proclivities.
One of the things I like doing most is banging whores. I go out and bang a lot of whores.
And not to mention, you missed one of the most prominent reasons for being an atheist. How about always having been one? There are plenty of people who are atheists from birth. People who were never raised with any particular religious belief, and as they got older, saw no good reason to adopt one. I mean, you act like theism is a default position that everyone starts at, rather than something that is imposed upon people by their upbringing and that they're indoctrinated into. I mean, people with no religious affiliation, referred to as the nones, N-O-N-E-S, have been found by the Associated Press to comprise about 30% of U.S. adults. That means that going forward, approximately 1 in 3 U.S. children are going to be raised without religion in their upbringing. So look for atheists from birth to be an increasingly large portion of the atheist community. Not that they aren't already a substantial part of it, mind you. Certainly enough that it should have been included on your list here, Jon. But now the more important question: how should people of faith respond to these non-believers?
So when people say, in response to my question, "What's your religious background?" I'm an atheist. I've changed my strategy. I didn't know what to do before, but you know what I do now? I just lean forward a little bit and I say, "Well, that's interesting. Tell me, how did you become an atheist?" They're happy to tell me. I haven't had one yet that says, "I don't want to talk about it." They never have anybody ask them that sincerely. And so I'll ask them, how'd you become an atheist?
So you start off asking them how they became an atheist, and you still are under the misapprehension that it's one of those 4 reasons that you gave? Again, I severely doubt any of them give those reasons as to why they don't believe in God. And yet, that's what you keep assuming must be their motivation. Even when you attempt to engage with atheists, you still louse it up.
And sometimes they had one of those bad experiences back there, so I'm just listening and paying attention, sincerely interested. And I listen to their story, however long they want to spend sharing it with me. I don't attack them. I don't quote the Bible verse, it says only a fool says in their heart there's no God. That would be a dumb approach at this point.
I'll give you points for that at least, though you don't say that you don't believe that passage from Psalms. You just say that it would be a bad idea to try to quote that to an atheist. It would be better if you would say that that passage is a bad one and one of the parts of the Bible that should be ignored. Like the stuff about not wearing mixed fabrics, or being slave owners, or committing genocide. Modern Christians have no problem ignoring those passages and several others, but when it comes to the ones that say that a fool has said in his heart there's no God, you generally are all on board with that one, aren't you?
I have 2 basic things I do with atheists. The first approach is this. After listening to them, I'll ask them a question. Since you become an adult, have you ever had the opportunity to sit down with somebody and hear a clear presentation without pressure about what Christianity is really all about?
Wow, where do I start with this? Okay, so you think that everyone starts with the default position of believing in God or being religious. You make no allowances for people being born into or being lifelong atheists, and yet you don't think that people identifying as atheists have ever had occasion to learn about Christianity? What do you think formerly religious people were doing all those Sunday mornings in church throughout their whole lives? Napping? Playing on a Game Boy? Reading smuggled-in copies of Hustler? Any of which would have been a more productive use of my time. As a former Catholic, I've listened to literally thousands of presentations, sermons, discussions, and explanations of what Christianity is actually about. Or at least what each of the presenters' interpretations of what Christianity is really about. Because every sermonizer will claim it's something a little different. Geez, John, do you really think that the problem formerly Christian atheists have is ignorance of the religion that we were raised in? Then there's the not insignificant problem of the Christian-centric attitude you're displaying. Why should an atheist listen to a presentation of what Christianity is really about and not instead delve into Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Wiccan, Neo-paganism, or any of the other thousands of religions that exist and are still practiced to this day? How do you know the atheist you are talking to didn't come out of one of those other religions, and maybe they just didn't give it a fair shake before they abandoned it? Why shouldn't an atheist go for one of the other God beliefs instead of yours? Oh, right, because the religion that you were born into, indoctrinated into from birth, and that you've hitched your wagon to, largely through the sunk cost fallacy, is the real, true, and correct one, right?
So most of them are going to say, no. I've had some say that to me recently. And then I'll say, well, if you would be interested, I'd be glad to get together with you and share these studies I have that will give you a clear explanation of what it's all about. And I'll explain the 4 studies we have, and we do one a week, and we get together, and there's no pressure.
You know what has even less pressure than that? Not doing any of that.
I say, I'd like to ask you a question. It's sort of a tough question. But here it is. According to your understanding, what does the Bible say a person has to do to be sure that when they die, they'll go to heaven?
To be absolutely sure that they will go to heaven? Nothing. There's nothing one can do to be absolutely, positively, 100% sure that they will go to heaven, according to the Bible. According to the Bible, there are only 2 people we know for certain are in heaven. Jesus, who of course was just supposedly the mortal incarnation of God, so obviously he was going to heaven. Foregone conclusion there. But the only other person we can know, according to the Bible, to be in heaven is the penitent thief, who was next to Jesus when he was crucified and asked Jesus to remember him when Jesus returned to heaven. In Luke 23:39, Jesus said, "Amen, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." So he is the only one we can know for sure to be in heaven with Jesus. Now, there are things the Bible says and the faith says that you can do to score more cosmic brownie points and increase your chances of getting into heaven. They include things like accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, repentance of sins, and if you can get absolved of sins through confession or last rites when you're on your deathbed, you have even better chances. So do your best to die in a hospital or something where you can see it coming and get right with God before your death. But if you, say, get into a car crash or something before having a chance to have a priest tell you that you're all good with the man upstairs, you might be screwed. Other things include professing the faith, attempt to live the word, though we all fall short of the glory of God, and always be prepared to give reason for the hope that you have. These are some of the things that can tip the scales in your favor of getting through the velvet rope where St. Peter is the bouncer. But the short answer, you can't know what will for sure get you into heaven. There, did I pass the Christianity knowledge test, John?
Well, you have to keep the 10 Commandments, go to church, give money. And I love to hear that, because my response to that is, that's very interesting. That's what a lot of people think. But I want to tell you, if I believe that, I'd be an atheist too.
If you believed that heaven existed, that God presided over it, that the Bible was true, and that it claimed that you needed to keep the 10 Commandments, go to church, and give money to the church, then you'd be an atheist. Let me simplify that statement. If you believed that God existed, and that stuff was true of the God that you believe exists, you'd be an atheist, defined as a person who does not believe in the existence of God. That says it all when it comes to what John thinks an atheist is, doesn't it? So that was John Hindi and his thoughts on what an atheist is and how a Christian should converse with them. We had erroneous strawman motivations for why one would be an atheist, intellectually dishonest questions about why they are an atheist that you then don't listen to and just assume it's because they want to sin or are mad at God, and then condescending assumptions that they don't understand Christianity and need your superior guidance to bring them back to the light. This is all pretty standard apologist Christian evangelizing fare. I wish I could say any of it was surprising, but it's all too common. A better approach would be not just asking atheists their positions and motivations, but actually listening to them rather than assuming that they all must fall into one of your preconceived reasons for non-belief. And then just not even understanding what non-belief is at all, thinking that it just amounts to not liking a God that they really do in fact believe in. Or here's a crazy thought, an even better approach: don't even ask a person about their religious beliefs at all. Or if it comes up and they identify as an atheist, just accept that, respect it, and move on. Because not every encounter with an atheist needs to devolve into proselytizing. Just be a good human, bro. So that is where we'll leave things for today. So thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Till next time, I'm Professor Plink reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.